And to Whiskey with a mate who is as concerned about the direction we're taking as I am. And I thought, well, I should really be cancelling Whiskey with a Mate. One, it doesn't seem quite appropriate to be drinking when other people are losing their jobs and all that. But life must go on, and I refuse to be stampeded, I guess. But unfortunately, we've had to obey the new social distancing. We can't have the hugger-muggers. So my guest is in the studio on the other side of this camera. But he is John Roskam, my good mate, from the head of the Institute of Public Affairs. John, thank you so much for joining me. Now, if you look on your left-hand side on the little table there, I have left you a little bottle because I thought, well, we'd better support Australian businesses. I'm sure these guys are doing it tough. They're from the Mornington Peninsula. I've tested one of their products before earlier this year. It's called Chief's Son, like Indian chief, Chief's Son. This time it's a whiskey, gosh, I don't have my glasses on. What does it say at the bottom there, John? Sweet
I'm
peat.
going to read it. 900 Sweet Peat. Single malt
peat. If you uncork it, John, and you pour it into the glass, which I also carefully left by your side, and have a sip of a peated whiskey that they've just put out. Apparently they're getting good reviews, and they were getting lots of people at the distillery until, I presume, now. Let's see if we can encourage business to a local industry that'll be needing it.
Well, Andrew, you've made me feel very guilty talking about an Australian product that should be supported. Given that so many people ring, email me and text me whenever I have whiskey with you, and they say to me, why don't you drink something that you like? I've also bought my own, which is, of course, something Australian. My Penfolds grandfather Tawny Port, but in respect for you, and because this is Australian, because this is Australian and Victorian, I will drink this, and I'll save the Penfolds for next time.
Now, I should say that it's been noticed that every time you drink whiskey on this show, you pull a face. So I want people not to look at your face. Look at mine. This is not bad. Cheers to you, John.
I'll try and not pull a face and cough.
It's not overwhelming. It's very soft.
It's sweet. It's nice.
Not much sherry there, but a bit. No, that's not bad. That is not bad. Chief's Son, support your local business more than ever. John, I hope people haven't, at this point, thought, well, look, that's enough, Andrew. You know, you've gone on about how we might have overreacted, how other countries are doing it better, how we haven't done enough where we should have, which is close the border and keep people who are dangerous in terms of being sick or potentially sick, keep them way away, really be tough on that, quarantine, which the government's now doing, and really check, but let Australians get back to work. Also protect the vulnerable, protect the sick, but let Australians go back to work. This can't go on, John.
Well, it can't go on, and over the last week we've been watching this discussion about health versus economics. Now, I find that so frustrating. Whenever you hear the word economics, replace the word economics with people's lives. Economics is our work, it is our livelihoods, it's how we put food on the table. And down here in Melbourne, for Daniel Andrews to say it's only about health and to dismiss the economics, just like Anthony Albanese is doing, I think is absolutely irresponsible. And they're not just shutting down the economy. During the Great Depression, you could at least go to church. You could go to the football. You could engage in civil society. The idea that we must shut down not just the economy but our community, our society, because governments around the world can't manage this is really upsetting and really disappointing.
Yeah, that's why I thought, you know, just one of those points there, and I know it's not the central one, but I thought the the NRL got a really bad rap when they suggested, look, you know, in desperation, we'll take the competition to a country town and just have the games there. So, like, you could seal it off, I guess, the town. There wouldn't be a risk. The players, well, they're free to not play or play as deemed fit. But while they were healthy, have something that the fans could see and feel that life was still going on. And I think, why can't we be more pragmatic like that?
And why can't we manage this? I think the NRL was right. I think the AFL was right to keep on going for as long as they could. The idea that we shut down society, we shut down our families, we shut down the things that make us human. I mean, another thing that we've seen this week is this debate about the experts saying lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. Well, you know, we can have experts who advocate a lockdown. We can also talk to experts from Sweden that has roughly the same infection rate as other countries with lockdowns, that haven't engaged in these draconian steps that have killed communities, and have managed something that should be able to be managed. This idea that we are rushing for the worst, most draconian, most extreme solution, which is not even necessarily a solution. Again, here in Melbourne, the Premier is threatening more extreme lockdowns. He's not going to tell us what his exit plan is, for how long this is going to go.
No, but that's
He's not going to get any parliamentary mandate for this. We're still, last time I checked, we're still living in a democracy.
I think that's absolutely right. When you talk about these serious points, maybe put that glass back on the shelf to add to the earnestness of it, John. I'm trying to somehow do whiskey with a mate with that. But you're so correct. Look, you know, I'm hearing them say, like Scott Morrison says, you know, this is what we have to do now, because then when we come out of the other side, we'll pick up and it'll all be okay. But John, if we're talking about 6 months, or even the Prime Minister again mentioned 6 months, or even we're talking a year, there's not going to be another side for a lot of people. There won't be. There'll be no business to go back to. There'll be no job to go back to. I mean, this is what's getting me. This idea that somehow we can freeze everything, slap it all on a credit card that will max out, and it'll all be okay. It won't work that way.
It won't work that way. It's untenable. It's already breaking down in the UK. It's about to start to break down in New Zealand. And you raise a really good point about the credit card. It's not our credit card. It's our kids' credit card. It's our grandchildren's credit card. They will be paying for the mistakes we are making right now. And that is very, very disturbing.
I noticed the difference there, John. Singapore has said, oh no, we're going to tap into our fabled reserves to, you know, really get people through this. They've got reserves. What a joke. We never did. We never saved up for this day. It's all gone. We were already $500 billion in net debt, and now we're going to add to that. I mean, I just feel so sorry for our children and grandchildren, and I think at this rate, our great-grandchildren. They are going to have to pay for us now.
And they're going to have to work for it. And a number of people are now talking about the fact that those urging a lockdown, those urging extreme steps, those urging 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months, many of those are in the public sector. They're not going to lose their jobs. Many of those have the ability to live off their wealth. This idea that we can lock down the community indefinitely can only come from the sort of people who are not going to be affected by this. I mean, we had the government this week say, as if it was a good thing, well, the senior public servants are going to have their pay rises frozen. Frozen? What about the quality of
pay rises?
Pay rises frozen. And someone like Craig Kelly, who I think has displayed leadership, has come out and said we must have equality of sacrifice, and for example, MPs should be looking at a 20% pay cut. And as Dan Wild said on the program the other night, no public servant should get any bonus until, for example, unemployment comes down to 5%. This is going to open up big fault lines between those who live in the real economy, the productive economy, who support private enterprise, and those who want to shut down the rest of the community.
I picked up a small saving we could make that I'd like to play for you in a second when our producers cue it up. I was going to play it to the panel, the Chinese ad on the ABC, if I could be told when that's ready to play it, you, John. But I thought that piece by Daniel Wild was great, because what it's saying is that a lot of those public servants are getting no compete payments, you know, like when they leave, all that. Who's out there in the private sector has got a job for them to don't have any of these? It's so extraordinary. I just feel so sorry for so many people who I think have needlessly lost their jobs because we didn't do what needed to be done and probably still aren't doing what needed to be done, which is quite simply put away to one side the people who are sick or likely to be sick, and on the other side the people who are vulnerable and could die, the very old and the infirm, and let everyone else get on with it, like we're seeing in Taiwan. I mean, is that so hard?
I couldn't agree more. And again, we saw politicians saying lockdown almost from the very first. We saw politicians relying on modelling from the UK and Europe that even the modellers themselves now talk about being exaggerated up to tenfold. We didn't have a discussion about how we can dramatically increase ICU beds, how we can mobilise industry to provide the medical equipment that was necessary. The very first reaction of the politicians and so many of the doctors and the health experts was lock us down, control our lives. These are the people who have for years told us about what we can eat, what we can drink, how we participate.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think too many people have taken this as the opportunity to impose their vision of a perfect society on the rest of us. And that's one of the lessons that is going to come out of
what you've just said. I think what you've just said is why the people who are most unquestioning of this lock everyone down, shut these jobs down, are people who tend to be of the left and won't themselves have their jobs lost. And I'm talking about people on the ABC in particular. They're really leading the charge. I think they've been quite irresponsible, the national broadcaster here. But speaking of the national broadcaster, and talk about, there's so much money is being thrown at this problem. Some good, but there's going to be a lot wasted. Here I think is an element of waste. I want to play you an ad, a Commonwealth Government ad, that was played on 774 Melbourne ABC Radio, a station that broadcasts in English, so I presume everyone that listens does actually speak English. Have a listen to the ad that they ran.
Following is an important message from the Australian government, translated into Mandarin for Melbourne's second largest language group.
要阻止像流感和新冠这样的病毒传播，良好的卫生习惯必不可少。这要从用肥皂洗手开始，至少要洗20秒钟。
Explain that to me, John. Is that just virtue signalling that we're very multicultural here?
Oh, look, you can understand the government wanting to, and the ABC, for as long as it exists, communicate in community languages and in different ways.
John, no, none of the ABC. Look, this is on an English language station. How many of the ABC listeners only understand Mandarin, had to have that in Mandarin, because they don't understand Virginia Trioli at the beginning of it, at the end of it, speaking English?
Oh, Andrew, I'm not going to be. I'm not going to be quite as tough. I'm not going to be quite as tough on the ABC in this regard. I think the ABC should be sold and has been completely irresponsible during this crisis. But I can understand what people were doing. There's many things I'd shut down that the ABC does, like lifestyle programs, like their property portfolio, like all of their internet websites, before I'm going to have a go at the ABC running something in Chinese.
Well,
sorry.
I think on that show, only 1 in 10,000 listeners would have had no English and needed that in Mandarin, and I think the other 9,999 listeners would have preferred to have that message said to them in English that they could understand. I just think, come on, this is just virtue signaling. But anyway, look, a small quibble. Basic point, I think...
Does that mean we don't agree on everything?
Well, that's very good, but it's only because you're wrong for once, that's all. But anyway, the government, do you see any sign that they will change?
Oh, look, I've been so proud of our Prime Minister, as many people know. At times I've been one of his biggest critics, but the Prime Minister talking about every job being essential, I think, is really important. He's displayed leadership in a very difficult time. I think Greg Hunt has done the same. As a lifelong Liberal voter...
I think the Prime Minister is also trying to hold back Victorian Premier Dan Andrews.
And he's trying to hold back Gladys Berejiklian, and as a lifelong Liberal voter, it is so disappointing that I see a Liberal Premier who has so little understanding of what is at stake in the community. And I think there's a lot of things that the Premier's done that I'll disagree with, but the Prime Minister's been right.
I think you're so right. John Roskam, thank you so much indeed. Hang on.
Thank you, Andrew.
The Outsider Gang is next, followed by Paul Murray. From me, good night.